Iowa's News Now Sports has your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
Felt like everybody thought the world was ending. When we lost to Wisconsin. You look at the outside world. I think everyone pretty much gave up on us. So, the leadership, the veterans that we have in our room, I'm proud of everybody, and I'm glad we're doing it for each other.
Impressive little performance by that man, Payton Sandfort, last night in Iowa's win over Nebraska. And we're going to be looking forward to what this team has next as they finish off the second half of their season. Welcome to Eye on the Hawks with Owen Sebring and Mike Howell behind the desk. Before we get into a lot of stuff today about Mark Gronowski coming to the Hawkeyes, we got a preview for the men's team, the women's team. Of course, you can follow Eye on the Hawks on all of your standard social media platforms. You can follow us on YouTube, on Instagram, the Iowa's News Now page, same with Facebook and X. We've got an Eye on the Hawks account that Mike does a tremendous job managing with a lot of updates for the Hawkeyes you can follow. So make sure you follow this account wherever you get your socials done. So first things first, though, we got to talk about the biggest addition to Hawkeye Nation right now is Mark Gronowski is coming over from South Dakota State.
That's why I'm wearing my Jackrabbits sweatshirt.
There he is. Why do you have a Jackrabbit sweatshirt?
It's a boring story, but I bought it at the Coralville Shields about 5 or 6 years ago.
Just out of irony?
Well, it was in the sale bin, and this Under Armour sweatshirt was originally like $65, but it was like $22.
Nice.
So I was like, that's a steal.
Sure, yeah.
And I think it's one of the best nicknames, mascots in all of college sports.
You think so?
Yeah, it's unique.
Solid.
There's no other Jackrabbit. The colors are great. I think blue's my favorite color, and that blue specifically is a great color of blue. So yeah.
I was just watching some old highlights of Gronowski last night, and they've got one uniform combo that's like all black with like some blue and yellow trim. Oh man, looks so good. But there he is in a Hawkeye uniform. We're already getting a peek ahead at him wearing the number 11. Was that Marco Lainez's?
Yep, that was Lainez's number.
So here he comes to wear number 11, wearing the sticks again for the Hawkeyes. What are your initial impressions, Mike, as Gronowski comes? Do you think that he's QB1 from day one? Like, is he the presumed starter for 2025?
Yeah, I'm going to play some highlights that we got from, is it our sister station up in Sioux Falls, you said?
They don't have a Sinclair station, but it's a CBS affiliate. Kello, the major affiliate over there, yeah.
Yeah, my initial thing, I think game one he'll be QB1. I think the way the coach is going to do it, though, is just, obviously you have a way better quarterback room than they had going into the spring of last year.
Yeah.
And you have guys who have started football games. Last year, you had Deacon Hill and Marco Lainez, so just one. And we all know how that was in, last season. We can move forward finally from that. But I think you say it's a competition, right?
I think it has to. I mean, all the coaches are going to say it's a competition. It's a little different than. I think it's going to be more of a competition than when Cade McNamara came in, because when he came, all the sound bites from Kirk right away, even in the spring, were like, Cade's going to be our starter in the fall no matter what. Like, they set out that he was going to be the starter. I don't think that's going to be the case with him. I think that they're obviously going to have to leave it up to, depending on who stays, assuming that Hank is here, and if Brendan's still here, and Jimmy Sullivan, and Jackson Stratton. Odds on, not favorite. But assuming all those guys are here, they do have to say that it's still a QB battle. But I have to think that Gronowski would be the guy that I would want under center if I'm a Hawkeye fan. I mean, is that who you would want, do you think? A guy who's a proven winner, two-time FCS national champ, a guy who's thrown for over 10,000 yards as a collegiate player?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, this is a guy, and then when you watch his highlights, he's a very accurate passer. He's a big guy, 230, 6'3", 6'2", got that stature. I think he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks Iowa's had since Stanley, right?
Yeah, sure.
Now, are the weapons up to snuff? I know the tight end room will be decent with Zach Ortworth and Addison Ostrenga coming back.
Yeah.
The wide receivers, Iowa's still in the mix for an FCS-level wide receiver from Chattanooga. I know that. Another year under their belt with Bowie, and I'm really confident.
Hopefully, Seth Anderson.
Healthy Seth Anderson. I think I'm really confident with Reese Vanderzee.
Yeah.
When he comes back after a year, after a true freshman, getting a lot of playing time, scoring touchdowns and whatnot. I do think it's going to be a major upgrade.
Yeah.
Than what we had. And
we do have a South Dakota State product here shooting some promotional shots in our studio right now. And so he was giving us a little bit of insight that Gronowski is coming off what was in his terms, maybe a little bit of a down year. He threw, 23 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. It's pretty good, but those were the worst numbers of his collegiate career so far. 2,700 yards, which is the third most, less than his sophomore and junior seasons. But again, as he informed us, he was missing a lot of pieces on his O-line that had graduated, kind of a new receiving core. So a guy who still came back to the Jackrabbits maybe with some weapons that were missing. So I still do feel that confidence, for me, much more so than when Cade McNamara came. Even Cade McNamara was so celebrated by a lot of Hawkeye fans when he came, and I was like, this guy's coming off an injury. I just don't know. I was never sure. I guess I don't know how you felt about Cade when he came in, because it's a very similar situation kind of, but I feel like I'm a lot more confident in Mark than I was in Cade coming in. I
am, and I really, half of me too wants to pump the brakes, because I don't, this is still year 2 of Tim Lester. I heard someone joke on Twitter that he's going to have a downgrade in weapons coming to Iowa. Not at the tight end spot, but I guess he did have Tucker Kraft a few years ago, who's just been nuts in the Packers this year. Sure. Just back when Cade came in, I think there was a lot of hype, and I was totally in that boat. And then when you peeled back the layers, coming off a major knee injury, when you look at Michigan, he's just littered with 5-star talent.
Yeah.
Which is kind of similar to South Dakota State at that level, right? They had a down year. They lost in the semifinals to eventual champion North Dakota State by 7 points,
But they do get, as far as the talent that comes to FCS, they're getting, the cream of the crop.
That's true. They do challenge themselves and play up, though. They came to Iowa a few years ago and almost won. It was 7-3. No touchdown was scored. And this past year, I remember earlier in the season, I watched what turned out to be a really bad Oklahoma State team, and they lost by a few scores. But at the time, I think they were ranked, Oklahoma State, and everyone thought they were going to win or contend for the Big 12. That didn't happen. Mm-hmm. But, I really do think it's a different scenario. It's a different kind of player. You see the arm talent. You see that he's mobile, unlike Cade. And I do really think a year after all the linemen and wide receivers have grown under Tim Lester, I think he's going to be able to Tim's going to be able to use his talents, and he's no stranger. Mark is no stranger to RPOs, and I wonder if we see just an extension of that a lot more. I think that you only saw a handful of them this year.
Who leaves from Iowa? Because this quarterback room where we've got now we have a South Dakota State transfer, we have a Auburn transfer, Colorado State transfer, Northwestern transfer, and then incoming freshman Jimmy Sullivan. I don't believe all 5 of those guys are going to be there in the fall. Who do you think is going to be gone?
It's not going to be the young guy. It's not going to be Jimmy.
Yeah, sure.
If I had to bet money, I'd probably say Brendan, but maybe after the spring.
Yeah.
I just, you saw shades of I can get this done. When Brendan was playing, Wisconsin was obviously a highlight, but then you saw moments in UCLA, and again in the bowl game where it's the good is very good, but the bad can just kind of fall apart. And I didn't really feel comfortable after that full game of the Music City Bowl to say he can command the team next year, especially with that tough schedule that they have.
Yeah.
And have a season that Hawkeye fans would really enjoy.
Yeah.
But I think Mark Gronowski, I think he is capable of that.
You want so badly to say Gronkowski.
It's hard not to say that second K.
It's true. The absent K. It's not a silent letter. It's a loud letter that's not actually there. I would love to see Brendan stay, frankly.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I still am a fan of his, and I know that the second half of the bowl game really went sideways. But I think that with another year of training, I think that he could be a solid QB2. I think that I would like to see him backing up Gronowski, maybe ahead of Hank Brown, who has a few years of eligibility left, and then, have that be kind of the pecking order. But
yeah, that's the thing with Hank Brown. I don't think he had to start this year anyway. He still has, multiple years of eligibility, and he could be that next guy. I don't see Brendan doing that unless he can beat Gronowski out. Mm-hmm. Then, why'd you bring, I guess if there's a competition and he wins the competition, I think you got to be confident that that's a good thing, because I don't think that Gronowski is a bad quarterback. I think he's smart. He's got arm, like I said, and he can run.
Yeah, I think that it's a pretty accurate statement. Not that it's setting the bar terribly high, but as you said, the best quarterback since Nate Stanley. I think that's a pretty fair comparison.
Here's a ESPN draft analyst I found on Twitter, Matt Miller, best Iowa quarterback in ... a long time.
Yeah.
So a lot of Hawkeye fans are super excited. I know there's some people, opposing fans, that want to trash that it's an FCS kid. I mean, Minnesota just had an FCS quarterback transfer in for New Hampshire, and
right.
I mean, they didn't contend for a conference title, but they still won it 7 or 8 games and was a pretty
had a nice season.
Good season.
Yeah.
I think it can be done,
Yeah, and I think that
Curtis Rourke wasn't FCS, but he came in from Ohio, jumping up in talent and had a great year. Cam Ward started FCS. I know I don't expect him, Gronowski, to do that stuff. Yeah,
be Heisman
but he
finalist.
started in Incarnate Word. Like there are diamonds in the rough, and I wouldn't even consider him that because he played for one of the top teams in that level. But still, like, it's not unheard of to jump a level and be successful.
And I think you come in, and he's a guy who I would not be surprised if, similar to Cade, who was elected captain from day one, I would not be surprised to see Gronowski do that. He seems like a guy who has leadership skills, who has lots of experience under his belt already. He was on the team for 5 years there. The 2021 year, I think he had an ACL that he had, ACL injury in his sophomore season, and so he didn't play in 2021. But he's just got so much experience already under his belt. I think he's a guy that could be a leader of men right away. And just watching him play, I'm just like, man, this guy's he's so mobile, cagey, got a good arm, just like sits in the pocket well. I don't know. I really like what I see out of him. And so I'm excited for getting a chance to see him in person in the spring game, and both what him and Hank Brown. I mean, he's a little bit more of an unknown commodity, but what he maybe brings to the offense too.
One more thing before we wrap up. I thought another interesting tweet from our buddy Elliot Clow from, was it Hawkeye
Beacon?
Is it Hawkeye Beacon?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just questioning myself whether he actually worked there. He had a source tell him they felt good about getting Mark a few days ago. Why? Anytime a quarterback spends extended time with Tim Lester, they leave excited about Iowa. I remember Mitch mentioning this in the newsroom, and Mitch is working late tonight, so he's not, and we're doing a basketball pod, so he's not going to be on today. But it's just one of those things where you're encouraged again by that hire that some people were questioning, and I think we had our questions this time last year when I guess it wasn't even this time. It was probably like a month from now when they hired him.
True, man.
But like, you get excited when you read something like this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just such a change in the mindset around this team that it's like this was a team that just a couple years ago was the laughingstock, literally, of FBS football, and now is a team that is like, boy, with Tim Lester in charge, this is a team that can land some pretty dangerous weapons from the transfer portal.
Way early to do this, but just this move, looking ahead, this is kind of a sports podcasty thing to do. What does it change looking ahead to next year? Like, is it a win? Is it 2 wins? Kind of thing. Like, looking at how tough the schedule is, they have all their tough games at home, except Iowa State on the road, I guess.
Yeah.
But Oregon, Indiana, Penn State, all playoff teams, all at home. And then you get your rivals, Wisconsin and Nebraska on the road.
Yeah. I'm trying to do lots of demonstrative motions because we have our promotions guy here, so I'm trying to do my biggest Pat McAfee things. I should have worn my tank top today. I think that if Iowa gets 8 wins next year, I think that is a big win for them. I think that their schedule is so tough and they lost so many guys off of this year's team that if they were to reach the 8-win plateau again, that should be gangbusters for them because they've got a tough schedule and they're losing a lot of guys. There's a lot of question marks going into the season. So I don't know if I'd say that Gronowski is going to be worth another 1 or 2 wins or if he's going to get them to double-digit wins, but I think that he could at least steady the ship, a ship that has lost some weapons. They're coming in without Caleb Johnson, without a couple of key offensive linemen. They're losing one of their captains in Luke Lachey. I think that he could at least be a steadying presence that keeps them on the trajectory that they're on so they don't have to at least take a step backwards.
No, I agree with that. I mean, you look at it, and they won 8 games this year, and you're kind of disappointed about that. But when you look at the competition next year, and it's not to say that Penn State, even though they're bringing back Drew Aller, or Indiana or Oregon, for that matter, I expect Oregon and Penn State to be playoff contenders.
Yeah.
But it's not to say that they will be next year. They could always take a step back or lose, a player with injury and just have a completely different season. But I do think, before that, I thought it really was going to be in a transitional year for Iowa and lucky to go to a bowl game.
This year or 2025?
2025.
Okay.
So now I think, you can win that 8-win mark, and if you upset someone, maybe you can get to 9 or 10, and if you get a good win, you could maybe put yourself. But I think this was the year to go to a playoff if you have 10 or 11 wins, just because the schedule was so much more manageable.
Really works in your favor, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. I mean, a lot more of the questions are going to be asked based on the defense, I think, in my opinion, just because, like, you know, again, the Michigan State loss and the UCLA loss, like, you can't really pin those in the offense too much. Like, they were scoring points in those games enough that normally they should win those. And so I think the question marks are going to be more based around, like, how they can rebuild on defense. Hello? Who's there? Mom? Is that you? Who's calling? Yeah, so I think that if nothing else, I think that he'll be at least a steadying presence to keep them around that 7, 8, 9 win plateau. But let's transition from Gronowski now into basketball, where we just saw last night Iowa have its 10th largest comeback in program history, where they beat Nebraska. I know you gave up on the Wisconsin game, Mike. Did you give up on the game last night, or were you hanging in there?
This close to giving up. 2 of my friends actually stopped watching in the second half when it was like, was it 15 in the second half?
15 with like 15 minutes left, I think.
Yeah. One of my buddies turned it off, and then he said, if they come back, I'll do something. I'm not going to say what he said he was going to do, but he's not going to do it. It was one of those
Cyclone Larry promises?
5-layer burrito, Kansas State kind of things.
Tase myself somewhere, yeah.
Similar to that, yeah. Okay. But it was one of those games where I'm like, I even tweeted this, like, in the second half. It looks like they're quitting. There was a time where they turned the ball over,
same thing,
and there were like 4 guys just not even running back. Now it's a lost play, you know, but you don't see many teams do that. And then I was totally wrong, and I'm always glad to be wrong when I am negative about Iowa. But it was fun to watch. Yeah,
yeah, and it was like another one of those defining games for both Josh Dix and Payton Sandfort. I mean, Payton Sandfort was scoreless at halftime, and then he finishes with 30 points, 27 in the second half, and then another 3 in overtime. One of those games that people are going to remember Payton Sandfort for, even though it's just a early January win against Nebraska. It's like, you don't know if this is the win that maybe keys a late season push that gets him into the NCAA tournament or has him at least competitive in the Big Ten this year. A 30-plus point game for both Payton and Josh Dix. First time we've seen that on the Hawkeye lineup since 2022 when Keegan and
Jordan Bohannon
did it, yep. So been 3 years since that last happened, which seems weird that it's like that seldom that 2 guys will score 30-plus points in a game, but college basketball.
College, yeah, it's a little lower scoring.
Yeah.
40 minutes instead of 48.
Yeah. But obviously.
Last night was 45.
What's that?
Last night was 45.
That's true. But again, a game to be remembered, and both Fran and Payton, we had a chance to talk to them after the game and hear what they had to say about what goes down as the 10th largest comeback and certainly one of the most memorable comebacks in Hawkeye history.
Well, you know, you believe in yourselves, you believe in each other, you know, and you have a sense that you're never out of it. But that's what this league is. I mean, there's going to be a lot of games like this.
You guys are down 15 after what happened in Wisconsin. Did you say anything to the team? What was your message?
Yeah, to start the half, you know, we were pretty lax defensively. We were making, you know, bad plays, turning the ball over, and I just kind of told everybody, you know, we're going to be fine. Like, this is game 15. We got more than half the season left. Like, let's just relax. Let's change the season right now, and let's just, you know, get gritty. And we got gritty guys, and you know, I think we've seen it all season, except for that Wisconsin game. But you know, we really gritted down. We had Brock in there rebounding. We had Josh and Price making big-time plays, and I can't say enough about the plays that Price made in that game, just from a winning level and a toughness standpoint. And you know, everybody had to contribute, but we stayed together, and you know, that's the mantra. You know, bad teams fall apart when things go bad, and you know, I just tell everybody, you know, if we stay together as a team and, you know, block out what everybody's saying, just be in the room, be present, be where your feet are, then it always turns out all right.
There were just 2 such different narratives for that game, again, between first and second half, like you mentioned. Even for Payton, you know, when I looked at the box score. And
0 points in the first half.
0 points in the first half, and I'm just like, did Payton make a mistake coming back? Like, would he have been better off just going to the NBA, regardless of whether he got drafted or not? And, like, is he hurting his draft value by coming back this year? But then he puts on the performance of a lifetime in the second half. And so hopefully that narrative gets turned around as well. But the team coming up, a few of their games, are playing Indiana at home this weekend. Then they're heading out to the West Coast to play at USC and UCLA. Then the rest of the month from there, Minnesota, Penn State, Ohio State. And we've said it about the Big Ten all year that it's like it seems pretty wide open. That there's not really even still one necessary favorite in the team in the league. You look at these teams. Indiana having a good year, 12-3. USC 9-5. They're all right. Some teams that are just kind of the stats that you would expect out of a Big Ten team, I guess. USC maybe not a big scoring team, but teams are in the top 100 for both the net and the Ken Pom, and all games it'll be quality wins if they can pull them off.
Yeah, and that's the thing, if they can pull them off. And I think this team, I was looking at the bracketology predictions last night. There's probably updated today, which is a dangerous game in January. Like you never know who's going to go on a run in March or February. But I was not in there right now, right? They would need to get some quality wins. They would need to go on a winning streak. And they have the opportunity to do it because this Big Ten schedule is such a slog. But Jerry Palm from CBS does have them as their first 4 out, which, is about where you'd see them, right?
Sure.
I think this is a borderline tournament team. In the first half, though, and after that Wisconsin game, I was like, this team's going to be lucky to make the NIT. And those are the swings, in the middle of a season when you see these results. Payton said something last night, like, when he was saying, like, the outside world made it seem like the world's fallen apart, or this team is trash. But every team in college basketball suffers a 25, 30-point blowout. Maybe not like the number one team or whatever, but the number one team just got beat last night by like 40 points by Florida. Now that's 2 top 5 level teams, but still, like, that happens when you don't play well, and they didn't on Friday, and the other team, shoots lights out.
Yeah. Do you know right now who the highest ranked Big Ten team is?
I've got it pulled up, Illinois.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, I was just scrolling through the rankings because, and that's
possibly criminally underranked too. They just beat Oregon, who was like top 10.
Oh yeah.
By like 20 points, and they're only 13th right now.
And that's going to be the hard thing for Iowa, is that, like, as they are on the first 4 out and they're a bubble, I just envision them being a bubble team.
100%,
for the next month and a half. That's where we're going to be talking about them. There just are not many opportunities for big quality wins. Indiana certainly would be one. UCLA is ranked 22nd right now, so if they pull off that win on the road, that certainly would be a big.
And they dropped. They were 12th last week, and they dropped because they lost to Indiana. Nebraska beat them last week.
Yeah, but yeah, you've got the other ranked teams from the Big Ten: Illinois, Oregon, Michigan State. Is this a graphic you've got in there? No. Okay.
No, I just did
when you said you had it pulled up, I'm like, oh no, am I skipping ahead to a graphic?
No. I have the like their schedule pulled up on my computer.
Then you got Purdue, UCLA, Michigan's ranked in there. Nebraska actually was receiving votes in the last poll, so I think last night's win would help them.
I mean, any one of those ranked teams, especially on the road, and teams like if Nebraska, that last one of the season, like, those are quad 1 wins. It's not at home, but on the road, and any of the ranked wins will be quad 1. So they've got like 8 chances at quad run wins. They just had a really poor non-conference schedule.
Yeah. And the ones that they had opportunities for good quality wins in the non-con, they lost. Utah State right now is ranked 25th. Iowa State is going to be ranked 2nd in the country next rankings, assuming they win this weekend too. It's a wild time to be a Cyclone fan. But right now, as we mentioned, do you feel like this is where this team kind of belongs? Is just as a bubble team for the rest of the year? Like, is that where we're going to see them?
Yeah, I think so. It's almost the 2 things about this team that I'm kind of sitting at a believe it when I'll see it. The defensive intensity in the last 10 minutes was really good from Iowa. But from Fran teams, for whatever reason, for the past maybe 8 years, but they had some decently ranked defensive teams when Adam Woodbury was here. Like, they just don't play like that for a full, even 35 minutes, It's one of those things where good teams need to rebound, and they need to play defense when it matters. Yeah. And Iowa did last night, but they also made 17 threes. If Iowa doesn't hit 17 threes, they're not contending for this game. I think it's more of like you live by the 3, die by the 3. So when Iowa's not shooting well, and this has been the case for them for like 6 or 7 years, they're not going to win. And especially if they can't come close in the rebounding margin and give teams extra points, they're not going to. Now, you've seen them in stretches that they can turn it up. Owen last night in the last 5 minutes in overtime had something like 4 blocks last night. He played well, but in the first half you didn't see that, Yeah. So it's just, can they consistently do it?
Right.
And I'm sitting here, I'm like, that win was great, but you have a full list of Big Ten teams, and I just don't expect it every night. But if they can get like 2 or 3 in a row, that really sets you up pretty well. Especially these next 2 are very gettable.
Yeah.
A road win at USC and Indiana at home. Like if they win this next 2, I'll be very encouraged.
Sure. I did not envision the emergence so much of Josh Dix this year. I think that we knew Josh Dix could be a really good player, but I feel like, is he their star player right now? Like, he's been so good their last few games, especially. Fred Hoiberg, after the game, called him the most underrated player in the Big Ten. He had the game winner against Northwestern. He had a huge first half against Wisconsin where he scored, I think, 14 points. Scored 16 points in the first half last night, ended with 30. Like,
31.
It seems like and he played 44 minutes and 38 seconds in that game. Like, he was only on the bench for 22 seconds of the entire game last night. Like, he's a guy who is starting to emerge as, like, maybe Iowa's best player, or at least in the conversation for that.
Yeah, I would say he is right now, and I think a lot of times this team tries to run through Payton, and that was the star player coming back because he was flirting with the NBA, could have possibly been a second-round pick. But I guess I don't know what the answer is, but I do think Josh, it just seems he seems to let the game come to him, and he is amazing. But I wonder if you can force it. I know Fran last night said, like, you don't want to force, he was talking about Payton, you don't want to force too much. When he takes those shots, it has to come naturally, So I wonder if that's the same with Josh.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see now that more teams are going to be focusing in on him. Like, can he keep this up? I still am waiting for a little bit more out of Owen after his breakout freshman season. I'm still kind of waiting to see more of him stepping into a starring role, but I don't feel like that's totally happened for him yet. Reliable, solid player, but just not quite the dependable star that they were maybe hoping for this year, or at least I was hoping for out of him.
Yeah, and I was expecting more out of Seydou Traore. I know he's young, with a transfer coming in, he had a good size, good athletic ability, and I know Fran said last night too, he was going to get him back into he only played 10 minutes last night, and most of it was in the first half. He wanted to get him back in to the game in the second half, but stuck with the lineup that was making plays, which is fine. And Drew Thelwell, who had been starting for, I think, 5 or 6 games, he tweaked something in his lower leg, sat out the first half, was questionable. At halftime, he was ruled out. Hopefully that clears up. But he's been outstanding so far. And at first, before, I tuned into the broadcast right when it started, so I missed the talk of him being not in the lineup. And I'm like, did Fran switch it up? Because Nebraska does have a couple bigs. And Laje Dembele is a solid rebounder. And, when you go small with 2 point guards on the floor, you're going to suffer from the rebounding. It's just one of those things,
Yeah.
I wonder if that was strategic, but it sounds like it was an injury.
Yeah. They are a team that seems like it could be any different guy on any given night. Josh Dix has been showing up, but Drew Thelwell was the leading scorer against Wisconsin. Payton's going to have his nights where he's the leading scorer. Owen's going to have his nights probably. Heck, Price is looking good. Maybe it's going to be him for a few of these games. And that's kind of the same storyline for the women's team this year that we're starting to learn about, is that this is a team, too, that it could be any player on any given night. Jan's talked about that, too, it's obviously it's not the Caitlin show anymore, and so it's going to be Lucy some nights. It's going to be Addie's had her nights. Hannah might have her nights. One of these freshmen might have her night. Taylor McCabe has had her nights. Like, it's a lineup where there's going to be different players, and it's not going to be any one given player, which has been maybe a detriment to Iowa at certain moments where they don't know who to look for in the final minutes of the game if they're down. But they're still kind of figuring that out, and it's going to be somebody different every time maybe.
Yeah, the women's basketball team, you knew going into this season, losing Caitlin Clark, I feel like I say this almost every time, but you knew that the team was going to be drastically different in the way they can score points and the identity of the team. But you expected older players to step up. I think what's encouraging is the freshmen are filling those roles, which you always hope highly recruited players will step in and perform immediately, but it doesn't always happen. So when you're seeing, I thought Ava Hayden would be the one that'd be like starting and getting all the points, but almost, I don't have the minutes right in front of me, but it seems like Stremlo and Tegan Mulaney are playing more minutes and making more of an impact. And Aaliyah Guyton, now that she's fully healthy, I'm almost like, dude, she's earning more minutes. I don't, obviously I don't watch practice. I don't know what's happening on there, but every time she comes in, she makes a play, and she's a good defender. So
yeah, that's why I always wonder with Leah too. It's like she is always doing something good when the ball is in her hands. Like, how is she not in there more? And so, and I think I heard as we had the press conference this morning with the women's team, I think that there's maybe some turnover issues, or it's something where she can be a little bit reckless with the ball sometimes.
Yeah, she's still young.
Learn there, but she's just she just is always making big shots. She's never afraid of the moment. Ava, even though we got a chance to talk to her today, I'd like to dive more into this with Jan one of these days. With again, she was the one that they were talking about preseason. Like, she's really emerging. She's separating herself as the best center on the team. And then, it's been. Addie's been great, thankfully, but we just have not seen as much of Ava as we maybe thought that we would this season. But
I do have the minutes up right now, and I'm kind of shocked. So, of the freshmen, Taylor Stremlow is averaging 16.7 minutes a game, which is the most.
Okay.
Aaliyah Guyton's actually averaging the second most.
Really?
But she's played less games, so 11 and a half minutes. And then Tegan Mulaney's got 10 minutes, so those three are the ones. Ava, 9 minutes a game.
Okay. And Tegan could play more. It seems like she was playing more at the beginning of the year, again, maybe because Sydney wasn't playing as much. I don't know if that was kind of why she was filling that role a little bit more. But all capable players. Obviously, the game against Maryland was not pretty on Sunday, but what they kept going back to was they just got wrecked in that first half against Maryland. But they won both the third quarter and the fourth quarter. In the third, outscored Maryland 16-11. In the fourth, outscored them 23-15. Ended up just being an 8-point loss versus, how many were they down by at halftime? Like 15?
Yeah, it wasn't pretty.
Something like that. They just looked so bad in the first half of that game against a team that, Maryland's, they're undefeated, and they're number 8, and a team that might compete for a Final Four this year. And so it's not like...
Not out of the question, yeah, right. They're a good team.
Yeah, it's not like you're doing that against an average Big Ten team. And so everybody seems to be just really encouraged by the fact that they did make that comeback in the second half, and they did settle in and didn't lose their focus at halftime when they were down by so much. Has been the narrative after that game.
Yeah, it feels weird when the games they have lost, when you're thinking Tennessee, Michigan State on the road, and now a very good Maryland, who might be the top, at least the top, four teams in the Big Ten.
A lot of good Big Ten teams.
Yeah, there are. I think a lot of people are wondering I shouldn't say wondering, but it almost seems like, oh, of course, they're not as good as they were last year. They're not going to contend for the Big Ten, which might be the case, but UCLA looks like one of the top 4 teams in the country.
Sure.
USC has, Juju Watkins. Like we said, Maryland's a really good ball club, and Ohio State usually has a ton of good players too. I see them being in a battle for that middle ground in the Big Ten, from that possibly 4, all the way down to maybe 9 or 10, because there's a lot of solid teams in the Big Ten. And that's where I see them right now, but they totally could be one of those, that 4th spot,
Possibly, yeah. Right now you have 4 Big Ten teams in the top 10. UCLA's 1, USC's 4, Maryland's 8, Ohio State's 9. Ohio State is 14-0, Maryland's 14-0, UCLA's 16-0, USC is 14-1. They had a non-con loss to Notre Dame, I believe. And then you've got Minnesota is 15-1. It's just absurd how good the Big Ten is this year in women's basketball. So Iowa, when I'm trying to project what their possibility is, even for the Big Ten tournament, I'm like, this will be a team that's lucky to get to the Big Ten semifinals. That would be a major win for them if they just get to the semis, because there is so much deep talent in this conference.
Yeah, it's almost one of those things where you shouldn't be discouraged if you see a 6 or 7 by their name come the tournament. But side note, I tried to look this up. Do you know how the Big Ten tournament works this year?
No freaking
I cannot find a bracket anywhere. No.
Okay.
I know, at least on the men's side, not everyone's going to qualify for it.
Okay.
I think it's top 15 or 6. I think 2 teams might be left out.
Okay.
Now, obviously, I don't think either team is in those categories for the men or the women.
Yeah.
But I had a hard time. I might just email the
Big
sports
Ten,
information at Iowa, see if they have it.
Yeah. So potentially.
I just wanted to see how many buys there were,
Right. Or is it just a straight 16-team tournament?
You got to give someone a buy, right? Maybe not for these big tournaments.
Yeah, I really don't know. Most conference tournaments, you let the lower seeds play it out for one round and give the better
I really like,
buy, but I don't know.
It's different because a lot of the top teams are going to make the tournament anyway for major, or for the Power 4 or 5, however it is in basketball. But I do really like on the lower conference, the mid-majors, when they have like the top 2 seeds just advance to the semifinals, and then they do those tiered brackets, you know? So they have like a 3 or 4 bye. Because especially for one bid leagues, like I think that's the way to go.
Yeah.
Just to make sure your good teams are going to be at the front of the line.
It appears, so I pulled up the 2025 Big Ten men's bracket. It appears that 15 teams make the tournament.
Okay, so 15 and 14 will probably do a play-in on a Wednesday or Tuesday.
So it appears that the first round, 14 plays 11, 15 plays 10, 13 plays 12. The number one, the top 4 seeds get 2 byes.
Okay, and the 5th seed gets a bye?
5, 6, and 7 seeds also get a bye.
Okay.
So there's kind of a complex bracket here because there's like the 8 and 9 seed at the top, then they play the 1 seed, which is technically a second round game, that 8 and 9. That first round is just the 10 through 15 seeds playing each other. And then they play the 6, 7, and 5 seeds, and then those winners of those games play the 2, 3, and 4 seeds. Is this making any sense?
No, it does. I just need to see it on my brain is dumb.
Yeah, it is a weird bracket. Having 15 teams in there seems unusual, but nevertheless, yeah, top 4 seeds will still get a bye for the men's. I would guess that it's going to be a similar, if not exactly the same format for the women. So, nevertheless, we did get a chance again to talk to Jan today about this freshman class and how much they've produced. I mean, the way I framed it to her was like, you know, Hannah played as a freshman. I mean, Caitlin obviously played as a freshman. So we've had, you know, freshman standouts, but we haven't had like this big of a collective of true freshmen playing, you know, significant minutes in a long time. And she spoke about how much they're impacting the identity of this year's team.
I think the identity is we're young. I think we see the future often, right? And I actually think they're fun. I think they're fun to coach. I think when, you know, it's going, you know, pretty well, I think they're a fun bunch to watch. I think they play with joy. So I guess I'd say a gritty, resilient bunch that's pretty fun. But overall residing, I think we've seen a lot of youth that has done things that has really carried us in key parts of the game.
We've just talked to the freshmen as something big that's kind of defining this team this year because we've seen freshmen with this team. You know, Hannah played a lot as a freshman, Caitlin obviously played a lot as a freshman, but having this many true freshmen get a lot of significant minutes seems like it's kind of unique to this team from what you've seen in the last.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the unique part. And, you know, they all really contribute really pretty importantly. And I tell you, Kelly Levine does too, even though she hasn't gotten in. You know, it's a little tougher role. But, boy, if you watched our practice, the one who's talking and positive and leading, so she's got a huge role to play. She just isn't getting the minutes because we're a little bit, we have a lot more depth there. But, yeah, they're pushing. They're pushing the vets, and they're eager, and they're pretty talented. And I think once they continue to refine their, you know, what this level takes, and when you have that off season of getting bigger, faster, stronger, more lean, you know, more fit, what it takes to really go against the nation's best, I think they have a really good shot to be really pretty special.
And it can't be, I mean, you couldn't just about draw up a better bounce back for this Iowa team after taking that tough loss to Maryland. They've got a relatively favorable schedule coming up, if there is such a thing in this year's Big Ten. But not a lot of ranked teams coming up on their schedule. You've got Illinois is the game that they're going to be playing tomorrow night. That is Thursday night, if you're watching not on Wednesday. Illinois, 11-4. Coached by, I did not know this, that they have a Iowa native as their coach. Shauna Green is a Clinton native.
Coached at Loras a couple years.
Very good, yes. Head coach at Loras for a couple seasons before heading out to Dayton, I believe, for a number of years before heading back to Illinois. So right now, Illinois is a team that's 11-4. Jan talked about how, like, boy, in the early days of playing Illinois, it's like you'd go there and it was just like cavernous. You know, you'd hear just echoes in the building, but they've built a decent fan base over the last few seasons. 11-4. Solid Big Ten team, not a contender, but they've got a good roster this year, I think. And Indiana, 10-4. not quite the Indiana team that we saw the last couple of seasons. Took a couple early losses to Butler and Harvard, but have played pretty good since then. Their other 2 losses are to a ranked North Carolina team and to number 1 UCLA, I think was their last game. And so Indiana's going to be a tough game. But then after that, you get Nebraska, who's in Iowa City, always a tough opponent, but, they too, where are they sitting? They're, again, kind of middle of the league, 11-4 right now. At Oregon, at Washington, toward the end of the month, who are in similar spots, kind of in that middling pack. They're going to fight for the middle seeds. Then they're against Northwestern, who's not very good, before they have that USC game February 2nd, where they're going to retire Caitlin's jersey. And I think I've heard the most expensive tickets in Hawkeye women's history are going to be for that night. Or
they were for that day. I haven't checked them in a while, but I just can't imagine people are paying for, $1,200 for a ticket. I just
to see her in the building, not even playing.
I get better angles if you watch on TV. If you watch on Fox 28, guys.
Oh, hey. Promo plug.
This week too, these 2 games, I feel like the Big Ten season, it always has these teams that aren't ranked, but they're still tough.
Right.
Iowa's net ranking, and it's not the greatest, but it still gives you an idea of who they've beaten and where the metrics say they are. Iowa's 30th, 38, 39. You can definitely lose to those teams, especially on the road. And then Indiana game, it just seems like those 2 programs have really developed a rivalry in the past few years, mostly with the players that have gone from both programs. But I'm sure still they're, with Sid and Hannah, they still probably don't like that team, and they don't like Iowa either. So it'll still be interesting to watch that on Sunday.
Yeah. Indiana team that beat them last year on the road.
Actually, 2 o'clock start. Packers play late afternoon. It'll be tough. I'll have to get 2 screens for that.
Who the Packers got?
Eagles.
Okay. Ooh, could be a good game. Are you really rooting against Cooper DeJean in the first round playoffs?
Oh hell yeah! I don't care.
You've got Lucas Van Ness on that roster, right? For the Packers? Yeah. I think that if they manage to win both of these games on the road, boy, that
Indiana's at home.
Yes, Indiana's home game. But if they win these next 2 games coming up, that's about the best you could ask for. Again, as much as I say that these are the middling teams in the Big Ten, they're still good and still teams that can boost your net rating a little bit more because, it's not like this team is a lock for the NCAA tournament right now. They're ranked and they've put together some good wins and they look good. They look solid. They look decent, impressive at times. But what do we think is the ceiling for this team, or what's a realistic expectation for this team right now as we've reached, I think, exactly the halfway point in the regular season?
Yeah, and Charlie Cream with ESPN, who does the bracketology, has Iowa as a 7 seed right now. So just a little background. I think the ceiling is possibly hosting again.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll reach that, but I do see a scenario where this team does get grittier. The freshmen do start to play more poised, even though they play poised all year, but just a little more sound. This team, unlike other Iowa teams from the past, does play decent defense. The thing that surprises me, and it's kind of ironic, is 3-point shooting hasn't been great. So that needs to improve to really hit that ceiling. But I do think that that's the ceiling. Now, I'm more realistic. I think maybe they're like a 6 seed in the Big Ten tournament and around a 7 to 5 in the NCAA tournament is what I kind of see happening. But a very young team and maybe make a run in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah. I mean, it's always a weird conversation talking about a ceiling because, what's a ceiling versus what do we really think is realistic for this team? Because there are the flashes there, but there's just some things that do need to get worked out. Number one is the 3-point shooting. Another thing is it's kind of like just when you think that Hannah's taken a step, okay, this is the Hannah that we expect. Then, she was 1 for 8 from the field the other night. Just some games are still uncharacteristic for her. And so I sometimes feel like this team is going to go as far as Hannah Stolke is able to take them, just because she is something of a catalyst of that when she's playing her best, boy, this team can really look good. And that opens up Lucy and Sid to run the floor a little bit more and to get some open shots. That opens up Addie to be able to get some more shots from the field. And so I feel like the rest of the season is going to kind of depend on what Hannah's able to do. I think that their ceiling would be to maybe get the 4 seed in the Big Ten tournament. Realistically, I think they'll get that first round bye and be, maybe the 6 or 7 seed. NCAA tournament, the Big Ten is just such a gauntlet. It's hard for me to see them playing 2 home games in the first 2 rounds of the tournament. I think that would be a lot would need to change for that to happen. I think that they'd really need to improve in a lot of ways and pull off some games that they aren't supposed to win at this point. They'd need to find a win against USC, UCLA, or who else did I say is up there? Ohio State, to get a chance to actually get a top seed in the tournament. But I think that 7 is very realistic and reasonable for this team, 7 or 6, and maybe getting beat in the second round of the tournament is kind of how I would project their season to go from here on out.
Yeah, it's going to be a bummer given the fact that, Iowa has kind of made it that second weekend a lot in the past several years. And come tournament time, if they do bow out early, it will be disappointing, but it won't. I mean, just the gauntlet that they do have to play, if they finish in top half, it might seem like a disappointing season, but in reality, I don't think it is, especially when you have like a core of players who are going to be here for the next several years, and Eddie Deal comes in next year, another solid recruiting class, and then when Aaliyah gets a full year under her belt, I think the future does look bright.
I keep going back to seeing this season as like the bridge to more greatness, and it's a bummer to say that with like Lucy Olson here, that she's like kind of in the midst of the rebuilding year, or the year at Iowa that might not be. It's going to be kind of the down, again, quotes, down year for the Hawkeyes in the midst of this. But it's like, again, next year with Hannah coming back as a senior, with all those freshmen coming in with more experience, with Addie coming in as a freshman who I think will see a lot of significant minutes as a freshman, could start from day one. I think that's going to be a team that maybe actually does compete for a Sweet 16, Elite 8 spot. And then the next year after that, it's like, boy, you've got a more experienced Addie. You've got this year's freshmen who are going to be upperclassmen again. Yeah, I feel like the next 3 years of this team are only going to keep getting better and better. And so this year, as much as the postseason might feel like a little bit of a letdown if they lose in the second round or in the Sweet 16, I still think that has to be a major win, and you just got to kind of consider what's coming down the pipeline too.
Yeah, and that's the downside of doing podcasts weekly, because we could look back at this and be like, wow, we were really off on that one. And hopefully that's the case.
Yeah.
But you could also be a 10 seed and make the Sweet 16. You can come on a run, and with the senior leadership that they do have, and if you get a good draw, and they get out of, obviously the first 2 games they're going to play aren't going to be Big Ten teams. The Big Ten's super strong, but once you get in that tournament, if you're playing, a team that isn't as battle tested, maybe they could make a run. That's not out of the realm of possibility. And so when you look at ceiling, when you're looking at seeding, ceiling is different than, because it will be tough to get a top 4 seed if you're not a top 4 seed in your own league,
Right.
Just because you'll take the losses against those teams.
Yeah.
And your resume won't be as good.
Yep.
But when it comes to how far you go in the tournament, it always goes who gets upset, who you draw, and where you're playing, So.
Just to make sure I'm doing my math right, basically to be a top 4 seed, you need, or to get those 2 home games, you need to be ranked in the top 16, roughly. You need to be one of the best 16 teams.
Yeah, pretty much. They don't go by the rankings, but the committee.
Right. Boy, yeah, I just
Which they're 23rd right now.
Right. So they're not far off.
Beat teams you should, and upset a few teams, and you could get in that top 16.
And if they're a higher seed, obviously you're playing more likely, that 16th, 15th, 14th best team, and so it makes it a little bit more winnable than if they were to have to play against a Notre Dame or a USC or something in the NCAA tournament. So the chances are there, the opportunities are there. The Big Ten schedule is going to play itself out, and we're going to be here watching it every step of the way. Make sure you join us again for future episodes. I'm sure we're going to try to line one of these up again in the next week or so, as we have. The season is just going to keep unfolding in maybe unexpected ways based on what this team does over this weekend and next week. And you can follow the Eye on the Hawks accounts to keep track of when you're going to see us in this studio next, again on X, on YouTube, on Instagram. You can make sure you follow Eye on the Hawks and Iowa's News Now. So we're going to wrap this thing up. We're going to land the plane and then see what we have to talk about with this Hawkeye team next week, and see if this NCAA tournament conversation can flesh itself out a little bit more. So for Mike Howell, I'm Owen Sebring. We'll see you next time.